Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're plunging into an incredibly rich collection of insights, exploring how our inner beliefs sculpt our outer actions, how societies are swayed by powerful ideas, and what truly underpins ethical conduct in both our personal lives and, the broader public sphere, our mission. To give you that shortcut to being truly well-informed, packed with, surprising facts and practical perspectives you can use right away.
It's a fascinating journey, really. What you'll discover is how seemingly abstract concepts like attitude and ethics aren't just academic ideas.
Right.
They ripple out into the real world, influencing everything from your daily decisions to major global events. It's a complex, interconnected web, and our goal is to help you see those threads clearly.
So let's kick things off with what we call the dance between attitude and behavior. At first glance, it seems pretty straightforward, right?
Yeah.
A positive attitude generally leads to positive behavior. If you have a positive mindset about exercise, you're usually going to hit the gym. It's like a powerful feedback loop where your thoughts, beliefs, and actions all align.
And here's where it gets truly intriguing, because our sources reveal a fascinating paradox. Sometimes the very strength of a positive attitude can, counterintuitively, trap us in negative patterns.
How so?
Consider someone who holds an incredibly strong, positive attitude towards the institution of marriage itself.
Okay.
While that's a beautiful sentiment, this deep-seated belief can sometimes lead to a negative outcome if it causes them to stay trapped in an abusive marriage, for instance.
Wow. Right.
It's a challenging reality for many, and it's a factor some researchers have pointed to in discussions around divorce rates in various cultures, including historically lower rates in places like India, where the institution of marriage is held in such high regard. That positive attitude toward the institution in these rare cases can paradoxically contribute to negative personal situations.
That's a powerful and deeply unsettling example. So if we want to intentionally change behavior, we often look at two main approaches. The first is what we call cognitive therapy. This focuses on changing thoughts or attitudes first, with the belief that behavior will then follow naturally. We see this play out constantly, don't we?
All the time.
Think about politicians. They deliver emotional speeches or present specific facts to galvanize support, exposing past wrongdoings, all designed to shift your thoughts and attitudes, ultimately aiming to change your voting patterns.
Right. Manipulating the attitude.
It's also incredibly pervasive in social marketing. You click like on one shirt, and suddenly your social media feed is flooded with that brand, reinforcing the idea, nudging you towards a purchase.
Exactly. They're targeting your thinking to change your buying behavior.
That's a powerful look at changing minds to change actions.
But what if changing the mind first isn't the most effective path? In contrast, there's behavior therapy, often part of cognitive behavioral therapy, which takes the opposite approach. Change the behavior first, and the attitude will follow.
Okay, flip it around.
Exactly. This is crucial in situations like managing diverse groups with differing interests, sometimes called stakeholder management.
Yeah.
For instance, if you're dealing with a large, agitated crowd whose immediate thought processes are resistant to change, you might use deterrent actions, like arrests, to alter their behavior.
So the action comes first.
The action itself creates a deterrent, making them less likely to gather again. This approach is also particularly relevant when dealing with children. We've seen this in policy decisions, like Australia banning social media for under 16s and the UK's Age-Appropriate Design Act. For very young children, whose complex thought processes are still developing, directly shaping and guiding their behavior is often far more effective than trying to alter abstract attitudes.
That's a vital distinction. So if we understand these two levers for change, when can we actually predict how someone will act based on what they believe? Our sources point to two key scenarios.
Okay.
For spontaneous behavior, it's predictable if an attitude is accessible, meaning it's well known from past experience. If you know someone tends to be reactionary in a certain situation, you can pretty much anticipate their spontaneous response. It's like knowing yourself so well, you can predict your own immediate reactions to something.
Right. Instinctive.
But then there's planned behavior, like voting in an election. That's not spontaneous. It's a decision often made over months.
True.
Governments routinely try to predict this by surveying voters' attitudes towards their performance, their policies, or their leaders. If the survey results aren't favorable, they might strategically alter their campaign or policies in the months leading up to an election, all to influence that planned behavior.
Yeah, adjusting strategy based on predicted attitudes.
This raises a fascinating and often frustrating question. What happens when our attitudes don't predict our behavior?
Ah, yes. This is where we encounter cognitive dissonance, a real conflict between what we believe and what we actually do.
That tension.
Exactly. My own positive attitude towards exercise, yet my occasional failure to actually do it, is a pretty common example.
I think we can all relate to that one.
Definitely. But it gets even more striking in the political arena. Think about a country like France, which has verbally supported India's bid for a UN Security Council seat for years. The positive attitude is clearly there, but concrete action has been slow to materialize.
Talk is cheap sometimes.
It's a common diplomatic disconnect. Or consider political parties that champion ethical governance, but then, according to reports from groups like ADR,
The Association for Democratic Reforms in India.
yes, exactly. Their reports show these parties sometimes nominate an increasing number of candidates with criminal backgrounds in elections. Their stated attitude conflicts with their actual behavior.
Right. That's a major dissonance.
This dissonance is typically resolved in one of two ways.
Right.
Either you change the attitude. For instance, those parties might rationalize by prioritizing the winnability of candidates
Right.
over ethical conduct.
I justify it.
Or, less commonly seen, you change the behavior. This knower-doer split, where we know what's right but don't do it, or a crisis of conscience, often appears in real-world ethical dilemmas. Imagine a young public servant disillusioned by an unethical work culture in an organization that publicly boasts ethical conduct, or an organization with an ethical mission failing to act on a serious complaint like sexual harassment, perhaps prioritizing a narrow definition of professional competence over a broader sense of integrity.
That must be incredibly difficult.
It really highlights the gap between knowing and doing.
That exploration of how our personal attitudes shape our world is fascinating. But what happens when those attitudes aren't just individual, but shared by millions? Let's zoom out now and unpack the complex world of political attitudes.
Okay.
When we talk about these, we're really talking about your views on political parties, their leaders, the democratic processes, and the policies they enact.
The whole political landscape.
I remember being in an Indian city years ago, chatting with a taxi driver. I asked him who he thought would win the upcoming election, and he just shrugged. Completely neutral. Doesn't matter to me, he said. Whoever comes to power, I just need my work to continue.
That's quite telling.
His attitude was profoundly shaped by a simple focus on livelihood, perhaps even a disillusionment with the political system itself.
What's crucial to understand is how these political attitudes are often rooted in deeper frameworks, what we call political ideologies.
Right, the isms.
Exactly. These are the ideals, principles, core doctrines, and the long-term vision of a political party or movement.
Okay.
Take the example of Sheikh Hasina's leadership in Bangladesh. Her desired ends might have been societal control and stability, but her means, which sometimes involved using military and police force, ultimately led to public revolt.
Means versus ends.
It underscores how the methods used to achieve a goal are just as critical as the goal itself. We see various ideologies at play constantly across the globe. Nationalism, for instance, asserts that the nation takes precedence.
Yeah.
Right. We've seen how even political rivals in countries like India, despite fierce internal differences, can unite on international stages to present a unified national front. Their common language, as one Southern leader in India eloquently put it, is unity in diversity, reflecting this powerful nationalistic drive.
Interesting.
Then there's conservatism, which generally favors traditional approaches in ideals, principles, and policies.
Sticking to tradition.
Liberalism, on the other hand, springs from a rights-based foundation. It's rooted in the idea of a social contract, where citizens implicitly agree to certain rules, and in return, the government has a duty to protect fundamental freedoms, like property rights and the right to vote.
Okay, focus on individual rights.
Lastly, radicalism pushes for swift, non-gradual change. This often triggers reactance from the public.
Reactance.
Yeah, like the strong backlash against India's farmers' bills a few years ago, or even the single-use plastic ban, which ultimately led the government to modify its approach and adopt a more gradual, liberal stance. People push back against sudden, big changes.
Okay. Pushback. It's clear these ideologies aren't just academic concepts, they're playing out in current affairs constantly. Social media, for example, is a massive engine for polarizing ideologies during elections everywhere.
Definitely. A huge amplifier.
On the international stage, we've seen the U.S. warn India against significant infrastructure deals like the Chabahar port in 2024.
Geopolitics.
Or consider former U.S. President Trump's repeated claims about brokering trade between India and Pakistan to prevent nuclear war.
Right. Those claims.
And then there's the U.S. president's differing stance on fighting terrorism, vowing to fight it fiercely when it directly affects the U.S., but urging other nations to trade, don't fight when they retaliate against attacks.
Yeah, that highlights how national interests and underlying ideologies can shape international policy in very different ways. It's not always consistent.
So what influences these political attitudes that shape our world?
Well, many factors contribute to our views. Your family is foundational, often instilling initial conservative, nationalist, or even radical viewpoints.
Where it starts.
Education broadens perspectives through debates and diverse interactions in schools and colleges, exposing us to different ideas.
Opens things up.
Your socioeconomic status also plays a significant role, influencing views on government policies like tax reforms or actions against undocumented immigrants. For example, how communities impacted by drives against illegal immigrants in a particular region, like those from Bangladesh and India, might view policy given their proven voting rights.
Right. Your position affects your perspective.
Geography matters too. The needs of rural communities often differ from urban ones, affecting attitudes towards government initiatives like job guarantee schemes or housing programs that are designed for specific populations.
Urban versus rural divides.
Religion can profoundly shape views on policies such as LGBT rights or liquor expansion due to conservative religious practices.
Sure.
Media, unfortunately, can create bias through yellow journalism, fake news, and paid news, molding ideologies and public opinion.
A huge influence, often skewed.
And gender clearly influences political attitudes. With women, for instance, often showing specific interest in policies like gender budgeting or pay parity.
Specific concerns.
Naturally, individual experiences and factors like race also play a part. It's a whole mix.
Okay, let's unpack this. The profound Gandhian view on politics. Gandhi's politics were deeply rooted in morality, ethics, and principles, emphasizing that means matter.
Hugely important for him.
A direct and powerful contrast to the Machiavellian idea that the ends justify the means. He famously listed politics without principles as one of his 7 sins, highlighting how essential ethical foundations are.
Yeah, fundamental.
His concepts of sarvodaya, meaning the welfare of all, and Ramraja, an ideal state of righteous governance, suggested that true societal well-being and ideal leadership must first begin within the individual.
Starts from within.
For Gandhi, principles like nonviolence, truth, trust, and satyagraha, the idea of self-sacrifice for the greater good, were paramount. It all comes back to that powerful quote, "Judge your success by what you had to give in order to achieve it."
Powerful words. Were you willing to sacrifice your own principles or well-being for the greater good?
Exactly.
Gandhi further asserted that for him, ethics, politics, and religion go hand in hand.
Which can sound controversial today.
It can, but his unique and profound logic was that human society isn't divided into entirely separate spheres, social, political, or religious. Instead, he saw them as deeply interwoven, constantly acting and reacting upon one another.
Okay. Interconnected.
He reasoned that politics concerns the nation. A nation is made of individuals, and individuals by their very nature are often religiously inclined. Therefore, he argued, religion is integral to politics, and attempting to separate them was, in his words, absolute dirt.
Wow. Strong words.
He saw a strong, undeniable linkage between all these fundamental aspects of human life and governance.
It's clear that these political and moral attitudes don't just exist in theory, they profoundly shape global events. Let's connect them to a critical global issue that we see constantly in the news: war and refugee crises.
A very relevant application.
When driven by nationalism, many countries prioritize national interest over refugee welfare, which can lead to policies of refusing asylum seekers, as exemplified by various European nations and the U.S.
We see that playing out.
Conservatism often seeks to preserve the existing social order, which in this context might mean resisting changes in refugee acceptance policies.
Keep things as they are.
Radicalism, on the other hand, demands urgent, swift changes, leading to actions like building border walls, as seen between the U.S. and Mexico,
Dramatic action.
or attempts to drastically change cross-border movement policies, like those sometimes discussed in India's northeast, which often face public resistance and are later modified.
That reactance again.
In stark contrast, liberalism emphasizes human agency, human entity, human life, human value, human rights.
The humanitarian angle.
This leads to humanitarian aid efforts, such as India's Operation Brahma for medical aid or Operation Dost after the Turkey earthquake, or aid provided to conflict zones like Gaza or Ukraine.
Aid and assistance.
And from a Gandhian view.
Global conflicts could find peaceful resolutions by adhering to nonviolence and the universal service of humankind. A very different approach.
Now let's turn our attention to the pillars of moral attitude. These are essentially the deep-seated feelings, beliefs, or rules that guide us in knowing what is right versus wrong, helping us make sound decisions and interact effectively in society.
The foundations of ethical behavior.
Exactly.
These moral attitudes have broad application. Individually, they guide our daily choices and character. Within families, they help define roles and foster healthy interdependence, preventing overdependence. In organizations, they shape corporate governance, ensuring companies fulfill their corporate social responsibility beyond mere profitability.
Our sources highlight Dietrich von Hildebrand's 5 key moral attitudes, which offer a really insightful framework. First, there's reverence.
Reverence. Deep respect.
Which is about having deep respect, whether it's respect for all life itself or a profound admiration for an inspiring figure like Sachin Tendulkar. Second is faithfulness, described as loyalty put into practice, knowingly or unknowingly. This isn't just about following rules, it's an ingrained commitment to the public interest.
Going beyond the letter of the law.
Crucial for anyone in a position of trust, especially public servants dealing with conflicts of interest or nepotism. It's about serving the greater good, even when no one is watching.
That internal compass.
Third, awareness of responsibility. The timeless idea that with power comes responsibility.
Absolutely critical.
This is a critical implicit moral for any public servant. If you're a superintendent of police or a district magistrate, your duties begin immediately with that designation. Failing in this responsibility can lead to significant professional consequences.
Meritorious points, as they say.
Fourth, and Hildebrand calls this the most important value, is veracity or truthfulness.
Truthfulness.
The bedrock.
Its absence, he warns, corrupts every other moral. If you're not truthful, even if you're aware of your responsibilities or loyal to an organization, you might end up covering up corruption, rendering those other morals ineffective. Undermines everything else.
Finally, there's goodness, defined as to do right, to be fair and kind for the well-being of others, which links directly to altruism and genuine concern for humanity.
Basic kindness and fairness. These powerful principles stand in stark contrast to what we often see as a bureaucratic attitude, which can be negative, rule-bound to the point of being non-responsive, focused on self-preservation, leading to excessive red tape and a yes-man culture driven by a fear of accountability.
Just following orders, ticking boxes.
It often treats a job as just a job, not a public service. On the other hand, a democratic attitude is profoundly positive, ethical, resilient, adaptable, innovative, and deeply mindful of constitutional morality.
Much more proactive.
It prioritizes others' rights and one's own duties, embodying the belief that fulfilling one's duty is the ultimate right, thereby fostering a focus on genuine public service over self-interest.
That distinction really puts things into perspective, highlighting the difference between merely holding a position and truly serving. It brings to mind a thought-provoking quote from 2018. Falsehood takes place of truth when it results in unblemished common good.
Oh, that's a tricky one.
Right.
What's fascinating here is how that quote forces us to confront the core concept of veracity. It suggests the lie that does good, which is highly controversial in ethics.
Definitely.
Well, it certainly leans towards the ends justify the means perspective. In ethical philosophy, we always emphasize that means are also important.
Can't ignore how you get there.
Our sources argue that while falsehood might offer a short-term gain, it's ultimately not sustainable and often leads to long-term pain or negative consequences, echoing the doctrine of karma or the idea that actions have inevitable repercussions.
Short-term fix, long-term problem.
Exactly. When you encounter such a question in an ethical dilemma, it's vital to present both sides. Acknowledge when falsehood might appear to work for a common good in the short term, but then explain why it ultimately fails ethically and practically in the long run.
Okay. To wrap up our deep dive today, let's explore how we're constantly being influenced by the world around us. Social influence. It's defined as affecting attitude, thought, or behavior, whether we're aware of it or not. What's key here is that it's largely involuntary.
Often happens without us realizing.
Think about the media, celebrities, politicians, or even propaganda. For instance, a politician's repeated claims about achieving a major peace deal to prevent conflict, even if widely disputed, can influence public perception, consciously or otherwise, with a specific narrative.
Planting seeds.
Exactly.
What's crucial to understand is the clear differentiation between that often involuntary social influence and persuasion.
Okay, what's the difference?
Persuasion is a willful, deliberate attempt to change thoughts, attitudes, or behavior. A great example of successful persuasion is the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, India's cleanliness campaign.
Right, the Clean India Mission.
It wasn't just about passing laws. It was about dedicated workers and public servants actively engaging with people on the ground, talking to them, appealing to their emotions, and patiently explaining why changing their behavior around open defecation was so vital.
That hands-on approach.
That direct, willful engagement, that's persuasion in action, trying to genuinely change minds and hearts.
And building on that, our sources highlight Kelman's 3 types of social influence. First, there's compliance.
Compliance, superficial.
Which is quite superficial. The change in behavior only lasts as long as the external force is present, like a child studying only when their parents are watching.
As soon as the pressure's off, they stop.
Second, identification, where influence comes from a strong connection with a likable or authoritative person.
Role models.
You ever think how celebrity endorsements sway consumers, or the enduring influence parents have on their children?
Because you like or respect them.
Finally, and most profoundly, there's internalization.
The deep one.
This is a deep, complete influence, where the change is truly accepted in letter and spirit because you genuinely believe in the source's credibility and the message itself.
It becomes part of you.
Imagine a seasoned, respected leader like Sachin Tendulkar advising a young cricketer. That advice often leads to genuine, long-term change because of his credibility and the deep respect he commands.
You trust the source completely.
Right.
This really brings us to a crucial practical implication for any real-world challenge. For truly sustainable, long-term solutions, you should always aim for internalization-based change.
Make them believe it.
If you can inspire people to truly believe in and adopt a change rather than just comply temporarily, that solution will last and thrive.
And beyond these specific types, we're influenced in countless everyday ways. Peer pressure, the subtle nudges of advertising, personal conversations, media with its often biased news and branding, and pervasive propaganda. It's everywhere.
Constantly shaping us.
What an incredible journey we've had today. From the fundamental interplay of our attitudes and behavior, through the complexities of political and moral frameworks that shape societies, to the subtle yet profound ways social forces shape us every single day.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, understanding these concepts equips you with far more than just knowledge. It gives you a critical lens to analyze the world around you, to make more informed decisions, and even to recognize where you can drive positive change, whether in your own life or in broader society. It's practical stuff.
So, as you go about your day, we leave you with this provocative thought for personal reflection. Given the profound influence of both our internal attitudes and external social forces, how much of your own daily behavior is truly a conscious choice, and how much is an ingrained response to the world's subtle nudges? Thank you for joining us on this deep dive, and we encourage you to continue your own journey of informed discovery.